As the world increasingly embraces the principles of environmental, social, and good governance, non-interest finance offers a unique framework for addressing these challenges in a way that is both ethical and impactful. Hello and welcome to Islamic Finance Weekly. I am Rahma Saeed Muhammad. Still on the theme ESG and non-interest finance, today we will explore the vital role non-interest finance or Islamic finance and microinsurance or Takaful plays in fostering financial inclusion, supporting underserved communities, and driving sustainable development. Joining me virtually for an engaging conversation on the role of non-interest finance in fostering ESG compliance is Michael J. McCord, the Managing Director, Microinsurance Center at Milliman. Hello, welcome on the show, Mr. McCord.
Thank you, Rahma. It's a pleasure and a delight to be here, an honor to be here with you.
Thank you so much for joining us. So we would delve right into our conversation of the day. So we'll start with how, does Islamic finance align with the principles of ESG? I mean, now you can hardly talk about anything, talk about finances, talk about what without putting ESG into consideration. So how can, the principles of ESG and non-interest finance align, and how can this synergy be leveraged to foster sustainable banking practices?
So yes, ESG is critically important now, and everyone talks about it, and it's important. It's important that we start to look at these issues much more clearly. And I think that Islamic finance fits very, very nicely with the objectives of ESG, or the other way around. ESG fits very nicely with with Islamic finance. And the reason is because, you've got mutual cooperation. So you've got a governance structure that is transparent and open and managed by the people. You've got a risk sharing structure so that there's so that the corporate component is is leveraged, but as a membership organization. You have ethical investments, right? And so what's happening here is that the environmental components can be nicely addressed with with um, with Islamic finance and
Right.
Takaful in particular, which we'll talk about. Um, the social aspect, where we're actually helping people to sustainably get out of poverty, is tremendously important. And then the governance structure is also structured so that the people are making decisions and the members are getting what they need.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I mean, there is always that connection between ESG and non-interest finance. I know people say it's seamless. So yeah, totally agreeable. Thank you for that. Moving on, how can Islamic microinsurance or Takaful play a pivotal role in advancing ESG principles? I mean, particularly in underserved and low income communities. I mean, the whole essence of, collaborating or talking about ESG or finances is making sure those underserved communities are tapped. So, what's the way?
When we think about the ESG components in terms of microinsurance and Takaful, what we have to think about is also on the environmental side, especially, is the climate change and the climate change issues that are coming through to especially low income people. They're the ones who suffer the most because of
Right.
climate change. And with Takaful, we have the ability to create products, to create mitigating factors to help people to survive through these risks in a much more holistic way, in a much more secure way. So, in terms of the environment, looking at the climate risk and the particular climate risk coverage that we can have is important. We can provide encouragement to sustainable agriculture practices through microtocopherol and what we're covering and how we're covering that. We can also create a better enabling environment for when these things happen. If your crops die, for example, what happens then? If your crops die, what have you got? And
Hmm.
people need support. That's your food. It's your food or it's the income that you're making to be able to buy your food. So what are people going to do? Takaful can have a very important impact in that area. And this is
Right.
all exacerbated with underserved communities and
Right.
low-income communities. In terms of the social side, what microtakaful does fundamentally is it promotes social equity. It helps people to have the ability to, in a responsible way, protect themselves, to help make sure that what happens is that their economy, their economic status can move forward. What we commonly see is that people will do a little better economically,
Right.
and then they'll do a little better. But what
Mm-hmm.
happens is when something happens, they fall back down and they go up
Right.
and down and up and down, and they can't break out of poverty
Right.
without insurance or Takaful. And so what Takaful does is it helps people to move out of the poverty problem, and it helps them move to a better economic condition. In terms of
Right.
governance, it supports and promotes and exemplifies strong governance by adhering to ethical standards, by adhering to transparency. People know what's happening, what the products are, and they have mutual cooperation. And they're helping each other.
Right.
There's a reason why in Takaful we call premiums contributions because we're helping each other. And
Right.
this critically helps to move people, especially low income people, into a better position, a better, more secure, more resilient position.
I mean, thank you so much for that. That's clearly tapping the underserved communities and the vulnerable people. So thank you for, touching that. So how does Islamic microinsurance, as always, the CAFO, contributes to achieving financial inclusion while aligning with the social goals of ESG compliance?
The alignment of ESG
Mhm.
is is almost fundamental to the purpose and the raison d'être of
Right.
of Islamic insurance. Not let me say they fit together in a
Right.
way that is very beneficial
Mm.
and is very well linked together. And so this
Right.
linkage is what really helps. On the one hand, it helps to provide better and more coverage for low income people in a responsible manner under a structure that enhances that responsibility. It also helps to integrate other parties. We have to think about partnerships, and we have to think about how much more broadly we can go to help the members of the Islamic microinsurance programs or micro right? We have
Right.
to work on how does that happen. Now, I would argue that if we're going to be effective, what we need to be looking at is something that looks beyond just the insurance component. When low income people are thinking about their issues, their risks, they're thinking about risks. They're not thinking about
Right.
just Takaful. And
Mm.
so your Takaful should be the last line of defense. Nobody wants to lose their wife or their husband. Nobody wants to lose their cows. Nobody wants
Right.
their kids to have to be in the hospital. Are there ways that we, through Takaful and the community basis of this and the mutual help of this, are there
Mm.
ways that we can help people to alleviate these problems, keep their kids sick, keep their
Right.
spouse alive, keep their animals alive and their crops? Are there ways that we can do this? And so ESG also helps us to think about some of these other aspects. And it brings in other people and other parties that can help to make this work. If we were to say for a cattle product, that
Right.
we want to help the cattle stay alive, why don't we set up some kind of a system where people can talk to a vet whenever their animal is sick without having to pay? How about if we
Hmm.
had an advanced warning system? In Pakistan in 2022, right? Thousands of animals, sheep, cattle, bulls, buffalo, died in the floods because people didn't know the floods were coming. Why is that?
Right.
This is a
Hmm.
place where Takaful can help to coordinate some of these other partnerships. And this is supported by ESG too, because it's not just the Takaful provider that's thinking about
Right.
ESG, it's the others. It's the
Hmm.
meteorology department, it's the veterinarians, it's the feed producers, right? These people are also
Right.
thinking about ESG, and that makes it easier to create these kinds of partnerships, which will help to make that come to fruition and to build a better resilience wall around
Right.
people.
Interesting. Thank you so much for that. I mean, you've worked in some African countries like Kenya and Uganda, meaning you've had background from working from, both international space and the African space, which is like the third world country. So in your, from your perspective, from your retrospect, in what ways do you think microinsurance products can be tailored to mitigate the risk of climate change for vulnerable populations? And how does, non-interest finance or microinsurance facilitate this?
Yeah, so I've lived in countries in Africa. I've also worked and developed microinsurance in over 80 countries now across the globe, from Brazil to Philippines to
Mm,
Pakistan, Tajikistan, all over. So, and
right,
fundamentally, what we're looking at when we do this work is we're looking at low-income people. We want low-income people's issues to be responded to in the Takaful or microinsurance products.
right,
And so, what what we can do to help mitigate some of these climate change issues is,
right,
first of all, to talk to people. I talked to somebody in Tajikistan who says that he's growing potatoes, but climate change has made it so that the season for growing potatoes is
mm,
much more limited now, and he can't keep them in the ground long enough to have the kind of production that he wants. These are the kinds of changes that these people are seeing. How can we help them? And there are ways that we
mm,
can do that in microinsurance.
right,
Okay, if we think about microinsurance in a more broad way and think about if they are getting borrowing from Islamic financial companies, right? Why aren't those borrowings or why isn't that product focused on better productivity in the midst of these kinds of climate change issues? If we then think about the insurance component or the Takaful component, right? What we then have is a need to think about how do we not just pay back the money, but how do we help the farmer to survive after having
right,
lost his crop or helping him to do better? And then we need the third component, which I would call the risk management component. This is where the vets come in or the agronomists come in and teach people how to better respond to these issues, providing better seeds, more resilient seeds, more resilient and appropriate fertilizers. So if we look at this more as a risk management approach,
mm,
then I think we're able to help address some of these climate change issues. And if we
right,
bring in other partners, that helps us to do that in a way that is less expensive, more efficient.
mm,
And again, I think this kind of an approach is facilitated by the Islamic finance approach because it's an
right,
approach of helping your neighbors, helping people,
mm,
not just trying to just make money from your premiums, but
mm,
helping people is fundamentally the basis of microtakaful. And so I think all this comes together, and ESG just helps to focus other people on the need to think about better ways of
right,
managing these. And so and
mm,
these ideas, they come directly from people, from the low income farmers
mm,
and the low income shop workers and all of that. And that's what's important. We need to understand clients first
right.
and then develop responses to their needs.
Right. Thank you. I mean, that resonates so well with me because at the end of the day, it's about contribution and not just, piling up income and just stacking it. But at the end of the day, the low income people are being considered. So thank you so much for that. I mean, you're at Milliman, and Milliman is the largest consulting firm in the world. So there is a focus on ESG, focus on sustainability. So what emerging opportunities and trends do you foresee for Islamic finance in advancing green banking and ESG compliance, focusing on microinsurance or micro takaful?
I see an increased interest and efforts to do more work around Takaful and micro Takaful. We have some offices in Asia that are focused in that area. We do a good deal of Takaful work. And I think many of the principles are in some ways similar to other insurance. If we're trying to understand the risk that that their child is going to get sick, regardless of religion, that is probably similar. And so the actuarial work that we do, looking at those components, is important. And so much of Milliman, which is an actuarial firm mostly, much of them are looking at kind of those issues, those risk issues. And then those of us looking at Takaful are looking at how do we take those and apply those effectively to both the lower income market as well as to the Islamic finance market. And so
Right.
I think, among the things that we're going to see are going to be, yes, a lot more focus on sustainability. We have to think about how are we going to help people to sustain the gains that they make. There's the United Nations has the Sustainable Development Goals,
Right.
another three-letter thing, the SDGs, right? And so they came to us as Milliman and they said to us, we recognize that we can't solve the Sustainable Development Goals without good insurance. And without actuaries, we can't understand how to develop proper insurance products. And so what we're looking at is, we actually have a program now to go out and help improve the actuarial profession, including in
Right.
Islamic countries, and to help improve finance. And looking at new ways of trying to address some of these issues. And some of the things that we've been enamored with and looking at is pre-financing of disaster risks, for example, where in the Philippines you have typhoons coming, and in southern Philippines around Mindanao and such, you have typhoons that come, and what happens then? People get caught off guard. They don't have any money with them, and they're not able to either get out or fix their house or do anything. One program looked at how and paid actually for one typhoon. They paid in advance, 24 hours in advance. They actually paid to have people get their coverage. The money was dispersed by mobile money, so we're going to see a lot more technology in a lot of ways. And we're going to see more innovations like that. There are innovations like in South Africa with a company called Lumkani, who goes to the low-income areas. And one of the problems those areas have is that they have, when one house catches on fire, all the other ones do too. So what they've done is they've led with smoke detectors, and they put smoke detectors in all the houses. If the smoke detector goes off in your house, it goes off in the others too. And so they can come out and help you put out your house so that their houses don't all burn too. And so these kinds of things are what we're going to be seeing as we go forward. And Islamic finance, micro Takaful, has a critical role and a perfect ability to address these kinds of things and these needs that people have in a way that traditional insurance, commercial insurance doesn't have. They don't have the link with clients. They don't have the link with their members. And this is a place where Islamic finance can excel and really, really help to move the needle on sustainability.
Man, thank you so much for that. Like you said, Islamic finance moving the needle for sustainability. That's the quote of the day. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your enlightening input on this conversation. Thank you, Mr. Michael.
Thank you so much. It's been a real treat to be here, and I've enjoyed our conversation. Thank you.
It's clear that the principles of Islamic finance or non-interest finance align naturally with sustainable development, offering innovative solutions that combine ethics with impact. I mean, we heard Mr. Michael said Islamic finance moving the needle for sustainable banking. And with that, I would say don't forget to keep it to Sasnastic on the program. Follow us on all of our social media platforms displayed on the screen. Thank you for watching, and as always, I am Rahma Say Muhammad, wishing you Merry Christmas in advance.